I'm gonna turn 5 deaths from Dumb Ways to Die ultra realistic, starting with this. I'll start off by tracing over the character with the pen tool to create a new shape, and then do the same with the cut off part at the bottom. Next, I'll cut out some water at the bottom and fix it a little bit, and then add some skin to our character's body, and later added the skin onto the arms. But for now, I'm gonna add some more heavy lighting onto our image, and also put the skin texture on the bottom as well as the gross texture for his insides. I'm also gonna add some blood on the outside of that and fix the opacity. I finally put the skin texture onto his arms, but now let's add some backbones, cut off the top a bit, and then add some shadows onto the bone and the flesh. Now I'm going to take the leg of this skeleton and put it on the main image, and then puppet warp the legs to kind of match the original image. Next, I'll duplicate and flip the legs and then puppet warp those, as well as making it more white. And then I went around and fixed the cutouts and also added some lighting onto the legs, or at least what's left of them. But we can't just have no feet. Well, we can, but I'm not gonna be lazy. So let's take the foot from that skeleton and put it where the foot would be. I'm also gonna take some of the leg away at the top of the water and then add it back below the surface to make it look like it goes under the water. But to make it actually look like it's under the water, I need to fix the lighting and then add a faint color over it. I haven't really mentioned anything about the background yet, and that's because I haven't really done anything with it, but I got a nice sky and I made it more yellow to match the original. Now let's add some fish. So I used the pen tool to cut out a piranha because that's the type of fish from the song. So after cutting the fish out, I'll add 3 copies in a similar place as the original fish, and then remove the part of the mouth that's over the bone to make it look like it's biting down. I did that with the fish on the left leg and the fish in the middle as well. I changed the color of the fish, but now let's add a few shadows onto the bones coming from the fish, and then also add a path blur to make them look like they're flopping around a little bit. I'll put some faint blood stains on the bones, but we don't have a face, so let's make some circles for the mouth and eyes. I'll add an outer bevel to the mouth to look like lips, and then put a reflection of the sky onto the eyes and add the little white parts as well. I'll put some shadows below the eyes, and then with a slightly less smooth brush, remove the shadows around the eyes, which kind of makes it look like there's a bump or like he's in shock. So let's do the same thing below the mouth. Finally, I'll add some eyebrows. So here's the realistic piranha death. But we still have 4 more designs to make realistic, and I want you guys to let me know if you like my shirt in the comments. But let's move to the sandy part of the island and check out the next death. Alright, if I'm gonna be honest, this death is a little bit lame. So we're gonna have to make this a little bit more gory, is the word we're all looking for, I think. Instead of just having him on the ground, what if he was maybe impaled by one of the cactuses? I think that would be a lot cooler. So let's start off by adding a nice desert background and then using generative fill to remove the people, which is actually the only time I use AI in this video. But if you guys don't like when I use generative fill, let me know in the comments. Anyways, I'll add some sand on the bottom to go with the background, but this looks terrible. So let's adjust the colors to make them look more connected. And now we have this, so let's make it a little blurry near the top, and then cut out a few cactuses to add to the scene. I'm also going to take a part of this cactus to make a smaller cactus, and then add some shadows onto the ground from the cacti. Now let's take the character and trace a copy of the legs and arms. Next, I'll use the pen tool to make the hat shape and then do the same for the body. I added a texture to the hat as well as the skin, but I later changed and edited this, so we'll come back to this in a little bit. For now, let's place our character on top of this mini cactus, and I think you know what I'm gonna do. So let's cut out a little section for the cactus to come through the body. I'll add a few shadows, but let's make a little patch of blood and put it on the character's back and then blend it in. I'll add some dripping blood coming from the wound and some on his stomach, but if this cactus went through his entire body, it's also gonna need some blood, so that's exactly what I'll do. But let's also make a little puddle on the ground as well. Now I'll add some shadows and some more blood on the ground and also onto this cactus. After that, we'll come back to the character and put a new leather texture on the hat and finally make the cacti more green. So here's the finished version of the desert death. This design is cool, but the next 3 designs are gonna be at least 10 times better. And my last Dumb Ways to Die video got over 10,000 likes, so let's see if we can somehow beat that. And apparently only 3% of you are actually subscribed, so if you're enjoying, don't forget to press that button. But now let's move on to the next death. Honestly, I don't know how he ended up here, but let's stack some nice waves at the bottom, which we'll fix in a second, but first let's put some sand images below it and fade those together. Next, I'll go around and fix the cutout on the waves before tracing the character's body with the brush tool and then coloring it in. Now let's trace the, well, open part of his body and color that in, so this is what we have so far. But we need to add some bones, so let's take the puppet warp tool and puppet warp some bones into the same position as the original. I use the smudge tool to make the bones look more connected, but let's add some lighting to the body so it doesn't look as flat, and then I'll use a hairbrush to color the hair. After that, I'll add a skin texture onto the body and limbs, which I'll fade together and then make it pink. I then added a gross little texture for the open part of his body. I'll add a shadow to the ground below the character and also some blood on the bones and in the water. I'm gonna extend the shadows on the arms, but let's use an exposure layer to make some bumps in the sand below the character's body, which doesn't do too much, but I like how it looks. So finally, let's make a few adjustments using the camera raw filter, and this is what we made. Now let's move away from the beach and go a little bit into the ocean to check out this next death. To be honest, this character doesn't really look dead enough, so I'm gonna make a few adjustments to fix that. But first, let's create the background with an image of the sky, and for this one, I'm actually gonna make it nighttime because I think that'll look way cooler in the end. I'll recreate the shape of the octopus's head and tentacle using the pen tool. I recreated this part holding up the character, but I later removed that for something better. But for now, let's add a scaly texture to the darker parts of the octopus. After that, I'll add a field blur to the background and make it more blue, and then add another texture to the tentacle, but I don't really like it, so after adding the suction things, I'll change out that texture for a different texture, which is actually just a table. But after changing the colors, I'll add an eyeball with a reflection of the ocean and an outer bevel. Next, I copied the shape of the character and his little hat. I'll add a fabric texture onto the white part and add another fabric texture onto the main section. Now let's put our good old skin texture onto the character and warp it. I'm also going to add that feather on the top of his hat. Now let's use the pen tool to make the mouth and eyeballs. I added a reflection and some other layer styles, but now let's add some blood coming out of his mouth, and then go around and add a bunch of highlights. Next, let's use the pen tool to create the end of the tentacle and color in the lighter part. I'll put the same texture on the darker part as well as the lighter part and add a few highlights and some shadows to make it look like there's a hole. But something else that would help is some blood, so let's scatter some around the exit wound of the character, but if the tentacle went through him, that tentacle would also have a lot of blood on it, so let's add some onto that. I'm also going to add some onto the side of the octopus, because why not? But finally, you already know, I'll add a camera raw filter to finish it all up. So here is the realistic octopus death. So far, we've turned 13 deaths realistic throughout this entire series, but this next death I think might be the coolest we've ever done. So let's see what happened. Let's start by recreating the character's shape using the pen tool, and once we're finished with that, let's add the fork. I'll add a nice sky for the background and then use the grass from another image as the ground. I'll adjust the colors of the grass since it's supposed to be nighttime, but next I'll add a few bushes on the sides and adjust the cutouts a little bit before adjusting the colors and adding some shadows. I'll add some smoke at the top to look like a rain cloud, and then start adding the textures onto the character. I'll change the blending mode and adjust the lighting on the character, and then add the eyes and mouth. Now let's add a lightning bolt, which looks pretty lame actually, so let's add some layer styles to make it look a lot better. Let's also come back to the face real quick and add a nice reflection onto the eyes, as well as an inner and outer bevel to make it pop. I'm also going to add a faint red color in the back of his throat, but now let's add some blue lighting onto the cloud, and add our good old skeleton into the scene so we can separate some of the bones, like the legs and arms. I'll warp the skull to match the face, and then give him some hip bones to connect the legs, which we'll also do to the arms. I'm also going to give him some feet as well. I'll change the opacity of the bones and remove them from the mouth, but now I'll go around the character and add some lightning bolts around and inside of his body, which I'll warp around some of the bones and erase certain parts to make them look like it's actually inside of him. Now let's just do that, but a lot more. After that, I'll make the lightning bolts look more electric and also add some shadows and highlights onto the ground. Finally, I'll add a rain overlay on top of everything and add a camera raw filter. So this is the final death. I'm also posting a short tomorrow with a bonus death, so don't forget to subscribe and share this with someone who would like it.